Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was born on November 30, 1874, at Blenheim Palace, the ancestral home of the Dukes of Marlborough. He was the eldest son of Lord Randolph Churchill, a prominent conservative politician, and Jenny Jerome, an American heiress from New York. The Churchill family represented the highest echelons of British aristocracy, descended from John Churchill, the first Duke of Marlborough, who had won famous victories against Louis XIV of France. Despite his privileged background, Churchill's childhood was marked by emotional neglect. His parents were largely absent, preoccupied with social and political engagements. Lord Randolph was a rising star in the Conservative Party, serving as Chancellor of the Exchequer, while Lady Randolph was celebrated in London society for her beauty and charm. Young Winston was raised primarily by his beloved nanny, Elizabeth Everest, whom he called Womb, and to whom he remained devoted throughout her life. Churchill's academic career was undistinguished. At Harrow School, one of England's most prestigious institutions, he performed poorly in classics and mathematics, consistently ranking near the bottom of his class. He did, however, excel at English and demonstrated a remarkable memory, winning a school prize for reciting 1,200 lines of Macaulay's Lays of Ancient Rome without error. After failing the entrance examination to the Royal Military College at Sandhurst twice, Churchill finally passed on his third attempt. He entered Sandhurst in 1893, where his performance improved considerably. He graduated 8th in his class of 150 cadets in December 1894. Tragically, his father died of syphilis in January 1895, at the age of 45, just weeks after Winston's graduation. Lord Randolph's early death and disappointing political decline profoundly affected Churchill, who spent much of his life attempting to vindicate his father's reputation and surpass his achievements. Sources. Winston S. Churchill, Vol. I. Youth, 1874-1900, Randolph S. Churchill, pp. 23-156 Churchill, Walking with Destiny, Andrew Roberts, pp. 338 My Early Life, Winston S. Churchill, pp. 165 Chapter 2, Soldier, Journalist, and National Celebrity. Churchill combined military service with journalism in an unconventional early career that brought him fame and fortune. As a young cavalry officer with the 4th Hussars, he sought adventure and combat experience in conflicts around the world. In 1895, he traveled to Cuba to observe the Spanish forces fighting insurgents, writing dispatches for the Daily Graphic and developing his lifelong habit of afternoon naps and smoking cigars. In 1896, Churchill's regiment was posted to India. While stationed in Bangalore, he embarked on an intensive program of self-education, reading Gibbon, Macaulay, Plato, and Darwin. He participated in the Malaccan Field Force campaign on the northwest frontier in 1897, seeing combat and writing the story of the Malaccan Field Force, which became a bestseller. In 1898, he joined Kitchener's expedition to Sudan, participating in the Battle of Omdurman, one of the last great cavalry charges in British military history. Churchill's most dramatic adventure came during the Second Boer War in South Africa. He traveled there as a war correspondent for the Morning Post, commanding the extraordinary salary of £250 per month. In November 1899, the armored train on which he was traveling was ambushed by Boer forces. Churchill was captured and imprisoned in Pretoria. On December 12, 1899, Churchill made a daring escape, climbing over the prison wall and traveling nearly 300 miles through enemy territory to Portuguese East Africa. His escape made him a national hero in Britain. He returned to the war as a lieutenant in the South African Light Horse while continuing his journalism. By the time he returned to England in 1900, at age 25, Churchill was a celebrated author, war hero, and public figure, perfectly positioned to launch a political career. Sources. Churchill, Walking with Destiny, Andrew Roberts, pp. 3987 Winston S. Churchill, Vol. I. Youth, 1874-1900, Randolph S. Churchill, pp. 157-523 My Early Life, Winston S. Churchill, pp. 66-367 The River War, Winston S. Churchill, complete text Chapter 3. Entering politics Churchill entered Parliament in October 1900 as Conservative MP for Oldham, riding the wave of his Boer War celebrity. From the beginning, he demonstrated independence, criticizing his own party's policies on military spending and free trade. His maiden speech addressed the Boer War, calling for magnanimity toward defeated enemies, a theme he would return to throughout his career. By 1904, Churchill's disagreements with the Conservative Party over free trade had become irreconcilable. He crossed the floor of the House of Commons to join the Liberal Party, a move many conservatives considered betrayal and never forgave. The Liberals won a landslide victory in 1906, and Churchill, elected for Manchester North West, entered government as Under-Secretary of State for the colonies at age 31. Churchill's rise was rapid. In 1908, Prime Minister Herbert Asquith appointed him President of the Board of Trade, a cabinet position. The same year, Churchill married Clementine Hosier, a match that would prove essential to his success. Clementine provided stability, wise counsel, and unwavering support throughout their 57-year marriage. As president of the Board of Trade and later as Home Secretary from 1910, Churchill became a leading advocate for social reform. He worked closely with David Lloyd George to establish labor exchanges, unemployment insurance, and national health insurance, helping to lay the foundations of the British welfare state. These reforms demonstrated Churchill's progressive instincts and concern for the working classes, despite his aristocratic background. In 1911, at age 36, Churchill was appointed First Lord of the Admiralty, responsible for the Royal Navy. He threw himself into naval modernization, converting the fleet from coal to oil, developing naval aviation and building new battleships. Churchill believed a strong navy was essential to British security, and his preparations would prove crucial when war came in 1914. Sources. Winston S. Churchill, Vol. II. Young Statesman, 1901-1914, Randolph S. Churchill, pp. 1654 Churchill, Walking with Destiny, Andrew Roberts, pp. 88-161 Churchill, A Life, Martin Gilbert, pp. 155-267 Chapter 4, Gallipoli and Political World War I began in August 1914. Churchill was responsible for mobilizing the Royal Navy. He performed energetically, sending the fleet to battle stations and organizing the defense of Antwerp. However, his greatest wartime decision became his greatest disaster. In 1915, with the Western Front deadlocked in trench warfare, Churchill championed a naval operation to force the Dardanelles Strait, knock Turkey out of the war, and open a supply route to Russia. The Gallipoli campaign began with naval attacks in February 1915, followed by troop landings in April. The operation was poorly planned and executed. Turkish forces, commanded by Mustafa Kemal, mounted fierce resistance. Allied forces suffered enormous casualties and were eventually evacuated in January 1916. The campaign cost over 250,000 Allied casualties and achieved nothing. Churchill bore primary responsibility for the disaster, although many others shared blame, including military commanders and fellow cabinet members. Churchill's political enemies focused their attacks on him. In May 1915, Prime Minister Asquith formed a coalition government with the Conservatives, who demanded Churchill's removal from the Admiralty as their price for participation. Churchill was demoted to the largely ceremonial position of Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Devastated and powerless, he resigned from the government in November 1915 and joined the British Army in France, commanding the 6th Battalion of the Royal Scots Fusiliers on the Western Front. He served with courage but remained politically isolated. In July 1917, Lloyd George, now Prime Minister, brought Churchill back into government as Minister of Munitions. Churchill had survived his first great political catastrophe, but Gallipoli remained a stain on his reputation for decades. He spent years defending the strategic concept while acknowledging failures in execution, arguing in his writings that the operation could have succeeded with better planning and commitment. Sources. Winston S. Churchill, Vol. III. The Challenge of War, 1914-1916, Martin Gilbert, pp. 1862. Churchill, Walking with Destiny, Andrew Roberts, pp. 162-16. The World Crisis, 1911-1918, Winston S. Churchill, Vol. II, pp. 1523. Gallipoli, Peter Hart, pp. 1512. Chapter 5. The Wilderness Years. After serving as Secretary of State for War and Colonial Secretary in Lloyd George's coalition government, Churchill lost his seat in the 1922 election. He rejoined the Conservative Party in 1924, and Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin appointed him Chancellor of the Exchequer, the position his father had held. Churchill's term as Chancellor from 1924 to 1929 was controversial, particularly his decision to return Britain to the gold standard at pre-war parity, a policy widely blamed for worsening unemployment and economic stagnation. When the Conservatives lost power in 1929, Churchill entered what he later called his wilderness years, a decade of political isolation. He broke with Conservative leadership over three major issues: Indian self-government, the abdication crisis, and rearmament against Nazi Germany. Churchill fiercely opposed granting India Dominion status, delivering speeches and organizing resistance that many contemporaries and later historians considered reactionary and imperialist. His views on India damaged his credibility and isolated him from progressive opinion. During the abdication crisis of 1936, Churchill supported King Edward VII's desire to marry Wallis Simpson, further alienating him from the political establishment. Most importantly, from 1933 onward, Churchill repeatedly warned about the threat posed by Nazi Germany. He criticized Britain's military weakness and called for rearmament, while successive governments pursued appeasement. His speeches highlighted German military expansion, the persecution of Jews, and Hitler's territorial ambitions. Churchill's warnings were prescient but unpopular. Many Britons, traumatized by World War I, desperately wanted to avoid another conflict. The Munich Agreement of September 1938, in which Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland, represented the culmination of appeasement. Churchill condemned the agreement in Parliament, warning that Britain had sustained a total and unmitigated defeat. Events would prove him tragically correct. Sources. Winston S. Churchill, Vol. V. The Prophet of Truth, 1922-1939, Martin Gilbert, pp. 11148. Churchill, Walking with Destiny, Andrew Roberts, pp. 297-48. The Gathering Storm, Winston S. Churchill, pp. 1601. Churchill and Empire, Lawrence James, pp. 197-51. Chapter 6. Britain's Darkest Hour. Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, and Britain declared war 2 days later. Chamberlain recalled Churchill to government as First Lord of the Admiralty. The signal went out to the fleet: Winston is back. However, Chamberlain's weak leadership during the phony war and the disastrous Norwegian campaign led to a parliamentary revolt. On May 10, 1940, the same day Germany invaded France and the Low Countries, Churchill became Prime Minister at age 65. Churchill faced an almost hopeless situation. German forces swept through France with stunning speed. The British Expeditionary Force was trapped at Dunkirk. Between May 26 and June 4, 1940, Operation Dynamo evacuated 338,000 British and Allied troops from the beaches, though they left behind all their heavy equipment. Churchill warned Parliament that wars are not won by evacuations. France surrendered on June 22, 1940. Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany, which now controlled Western Europe from Norway to the Spanish border. Many expected Britain to seek terms. Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax advocated exploring negotiations through Mussolini. Churchill rejected any compromise with Hitler, persuading the cabinet to fight on. His speeches to Parliament and radio broadcast to the nation rallied British determination. He promised nothing but blood, toil, tears, and sweat, vowed to never surrender, and proclaimed Britain's finest hour. From July to October 1940, the Royal Air Force fought the Battle of Britain, defeating the Luftwaffe's attempt to gain air superiority. Churchill's tribute to the few became immortal. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. From September 1940 through May 1941, German bombers subjected British cities to the Blitz, killing over 40,000 civilians. Churchill visited bombed neighborhoods, his presence strengthening civilian morale during Britain's greatest trial. Sources. Winston Churchill, Vol. VI. Finest Hour, 1930-919 for 1, Martin Gilbert, pp. 11328 Churchill, Walking with Destiny, Andrew Roberts, pp. 409-598 5 Days in London, May 1940, John Lukács, pp. 1-36 The Splendid and the Vile, Eric Larson, pp. 168 Chapter 7. Winning the WAR. Churchill understood Britain could not defeat Germany alone. He cultivated President Franklin Roosevelt, developing a close working relationship through meetings and constant correspondence. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, and Germany's declaration of war on the United States, Churchill had the alliance he needed. He later wrote, "So we had one after all." Grand alliance of Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union determined strategy through numerous conferences. Churchill met Roosevelt at Placentia Bay, Washington, and Casablanca. He traveled to Moscow to meet Stalin, establishing a difficult but functional working relationship with the Soviet dictator. At Tehran in 1943 and Yalta in 1945, the Big Three planned the final defeat of Germany and the post-war order. Churchill consistently advocated a Mediterranean strategy, arguing for operations in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy before invading France. Some historians view this as strategically sound. Others, particularly American military leaders at the time, saw it as designed to protect British imperial interests and avoid the casualties of a direct assault on France. Allied forces achieved victory in North Africa in May 1943, invaded Sicily in July, and landed in Italy in September. Churchill pressed for these operations, though Italy became a costly campaign. The invasion of Normandy, Operation Overlord, finally occurred on June 6, 1944. Churchill wanted to accompany the invasion fleet but was persuaded against it by King George VIBY. Early 1945, Germany was collapsing. At Yalta in February 1945, Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin met for the last time. Roosevelt died in April, and Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. Churchill appeared before massive crowds in London on VE Day. He had led Britain through its darkest hour to victory, establishing his place as one of history's greatest wartime leaders. Sources. Winston Churchill, Vol. VII. Road to Victory, 1941-1945. Martin Gilbert, pp. 11440. Churchill, Walking with Destiny. Andrew Roberts, pp. 599-853. The Hinge of Fate. Winston Churchill, pp. 11000. Churchill and Stalin. Jeffrey Roberts, pp. 1432. Chapter 8. Peace, Legacy, and Historical Debate. In July 1945, with the war in Europe won but fighting continuing against Japan, Britain held its first general election in 10 years. Despite Churchill's wartime leadership, the Labour Party won a landslide victory. The British people wanted social change and the welfare state Labour promised. Churchill was shocked by the defeat, though he remained leader of the opposition. Out of office, Churchill delivered his famous Iron Curtain speech at Fulton, Missouri, in March 1946, warning that Soviet control of Eastern Europe represented a grave threat to Western democracy. The speech was controversial at the time but proved prescient as the Cold War developed. Churchill devoted these years to writing his war memoirs, The Second World War, a 6-volume masterpiece that won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953. Churchill returned as Prime Minister in 1951 at age 76, serving until his retirement in April 1955. His second premiership was less consequential than his first. He hoped to ease Cold War tensions through summit diplomacy, but achieved little. His health was failing. He suffered a serious stroke in 1953, kept secret from the public. Churchill retired to Chartwell, his beloved country home where he painted, wrote, and received visitors. He remained a member of Parliament until 1964. He died on January 24, 1965, at age 90. Britain accorded him a state funeral, the first for a non-royal since the Duke of Wellington. Hundreds of thousands lined the streets of London as his coffin passed. Churchill's legacy remains debated. He saved Britain and Western democracy from Nazi tyranny, displaying extraordinary courage and leadership in 1940. His speeches inspired a nation. His strategic vision helped win the war. However, historians also examine his failures. Gallipoli, the Bengal famine of 1943 in which millions died, his imperialist views, and his opposition to Indian independence. Modern scholarship presents a more complex portrait than the heroic myth, acknowledging both his greatness and his flaws. The debate continues, but his pivotal role in defeating Hitler ensures his place among the most significant figures of the 20th century. Sources, Churchill, A Life, Martin Gilbert, pp. 801–987 Churchill, Walking with Destiny, Andrew Roberts, pp. 854–982 Churchill's Empire, Richard Toy, pp. 1423 Churchill and the Bomb in War and Cold War, Kevin Ruin, pp. 1368 Churchill's Shadow, Geoffrey Wheatcroft, pp. 1437.